Welcome to the All Sorts podcast. And today we're doing another deep dive.
That's right.
Today we're going down to Peru.
Okay.
Looking at ancient Peru.
Yeah.
And archaeologists are finding all sorts of mummies.
Yeah, it's really incredible the amount of stuff that's coming out.
Yeah, and they're all different, right?
Yes, very different. So we have a 1,000-year-old mummy in Lima.
Okay.
With remarkably preserved hair. A 3,000-year-old mummy, potentially, from the Manche culture, also in Lima. And an 800-year-old mummy discovered in a unique burial chamber near Lima as well.
Wow, so all in like the same general area.
Yeah, all in the same region.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the 1,000-year-old one.
Sure.
That one has, like, the pictures are amazing because it has all this, like, brown hair still.
Yes.
It was found in the Huacapucalana Pyramid.
Yes.
In Lima's Miraflores district.
Yes.
Which maybe some of our listeners have even been to.
Possibly.
What can you tell us about this mummy and who it was?
Yeah. So this mummy likely belonged to the Yixma people who lived on Peru's central coast before the Inca Empire raised to prominence. They were known for their really sophisticated textile work and their burial practices, which we see reflected in this discovery.
So they said that they weren't really sure about the hairstyle.
Right.
Like if it was a braid or if there was like a cord holding up something else.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure from the photos, but his styles in general often hold cultural significance, reflecting social status, beliefs, rituals, all sorts of things.
Interesting. Yeah, because it was so well preserved. I mean, obviously they took care to do it.
Yeah, certainly suggests it was prepared for burial.
Yeah, okay, so this mummy was found with its legs bent and its feet crossed.
Yes.
They found ceramic vessels and like a bundle of metal objects wrapped in cloth.
Oh, wow.
What do we know about the burial practices?
Well, that position with the legs bent and feet crossed, that's very characteristic of Yixma burials. And the objects that are buried alongside the mummy are really intriguing. It suggests that there's this belief in an afterlife.
Oh, interesting.
That requires provisions for the journey. So,
Right.
It's like we're getting a snapshot of what they considered valuable and necessary in the next world.
Wow.
Right.
That's really cool. It's also interesting that Huacapucalana, like that pyramid, was built by the Lima culture and then occupied by the Wari and then finally used as a cemetery by the Yixma.
So many layers of history there.
Yeah, so it must have been like a really important place for a very long time.
Yeah, it speaks to the enduring importance of these sites for different cultures.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about that 3,000-year-old mummy
Okay.
that was found underneath a garbage dump.
Right. What?
That's quite a find.
That's such a weird place to find something.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah. Can you tell me more about the Manche culture and why this is so significant? Well, the Manche culture is known for their very distinctive U-shaped temples, which they very carefully oriented towards the rising sun. And this particular mummy was actually found within one of these temples lying flat, which seems to have been a common practice for them.
Oh, so it's in a temple that's facing the rising sun.
Yeah.
Does that tell us anything about what they thought about death?
Well, potentially, yeah. I mean, the rising sun is often a symbol of rebirth and renewal in a lot of different cultures. And so the fact that the Manche people were so deliberate in placing their dead within a structure aligned with this event, that might suggest that they saw death as a transition to something new.
Okay.
As opposed to an ending.
That's pretty cool.
Mm.
Okay, so our last mummy for today
Okay.
is that 800-year-old one.
Okay.
And this was found in Cajamarquilla.
Yeah.
That's like an urban center near Lima.
Yeah, that's right.
What makes this one different?
Well, this one, the burial chamber itself is quite unusual. It's very deep and elaborate, and it's reached by a 7-step staircase. So that kind of suggests that whoever was buried there was a high-status individual.
So like a descent into the underworld almost.
Yeah, it's a very symbolic structure, for sure.
So this mummy was bound with robes, and its hands were covering its face.
Yeah.
What does that tell us?
Well, all those details, the position, the ropes, the hands covering the face, they all point to very specific burial rituals. It seems that the people of Cajamarquilla had a very deliberate way of preparing the body for burial, perhaps reflecting certain beliefs about, protecting the deceased or maybe guiding them into the afterlife.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And then they found all sorts of stuff in the tomb with the mummy.
Yeah, like what?
They said there was a guinea pig skeleton,
Okay.
maybe a dog skeleton, and traces of corn and other vegetables.
Wow, that's interesting.
What do those offerings tell us about what they believed?
Well, those offerings are like a message from the past, right?
Yep.
They provide us this glimpse into the worldview of these people, what they valued, what they considered essential for the journey after death. The food suggests that there's a continued need for sustenance even after death. And the animal companions might have been intended to provide comfort or aid in the journey to the afterlife.
So they thought that, like, you were going somewhere else.
It seems likely, yeah.
Wow. And this burial was located right in the center of the town square.
Oh, really?
They're like a very prominent place.
Yeah.
What does that tell us about this person?
Well, a burial in such a prominent location speaks volumes about the individual's status and influence. It suggests that they were a revered figure, someone whose presence was deeply valued even in death.
That's amazing. It's so interesting that we can learn so much from these burials.
Yeah.
It's not just bones and artifacts. It's like we're learning about the people.
Absolutely. It's about connecting with the lives, the beliefs, and rituals of people who lived centuries ago. Each mummy is a time capsule, a treasure trove of information just waiting to be deciphered.
Yeah, and we're not just learning about the past, we're learning about ourselves, too.
Exactly. Through these discoveries, we gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and our shared human journey.
It's really cool how we can learn so much by just looking at burial practices.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Like how they buried people.
Yeah, you can tell a lot about a culture by how they treat their dead.
And it really shows how everybody wants to know, like, what happens when you die.
It's a universal human question.
Yeah. One thing I thought was really interesting was that there were all these different types of mummification.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like, we think of mummies, we think of the Inca.
Right, the Incas are very famous for it.
But this shows that it was way more widespread.
Yeah, it was practiced by a lot of different cultures in Peru.
So what does that tell us about Peru before the Incas?
Well, it tells us that Peru is a very diverse place.
Okay.
There were many different cultures, each with their own traditions and beliefs.
So why did they mummify people?
There were probably many different reasons. Some cultures may have believed that the body needed to be preserved for the afterlife.
Okay.
Others may have mummified their dead to honor their ancestors.
Okay.
And still others may have used mummification to display their power and status.
So it wasn't just one thing?
No, it was a complex practice with a variety of meanings.
It makes you wonder what those rituals were like.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, did they have special ceremonies? Were there certain people who were responsible for preparing the bodies?
Right.
Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of written records from these cultures.
Okay.
So we have to rely on the archaeological evidence to try to piece together what their rituals might have been like.
So we're like detectives.
Exactly. We're looking for clues in the dirt.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that they would bury things with the mummies.
Right, the offerings.
Yeah, like that 800-year-old mummy that had the guinea pig and maybe a dog and some food.
Oh, yeah.
What do those things tell us about what they thought would happen after death?
Well, the food suggests that they believed that the deceased would still need to eat in the afterlife.
Okay.
And the animal companions might have been meant to provide comfort or protection on the journey to the other side.
So like they were sending them off with everything they would need?
Yeah, it's really quite touching.
Like a little care package?
Yeah, it shows how much they cared for their loved ones.
Okay. I also read that some people kept doing mummification even after the Spanish came.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which is interesting because the Spanish tried to make everybody be Catholic.
They did. They tried to suppress a lot of the indigenous traditions.
So why do you think people kept doing it?
Well, I think it shows just how important these practices were to them.
Okay.
It was a way for them to hold on to their cultural identity in the face of oppression.
It's like a little act of rebellion almost.
In a way.
Yes. That's really cool. So there's obviously still a lot we don't know about ancient Peru.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're just scratching the surface.
What are you most curious about?
Well, one thing I'm really interested in is how these different cultures interacted with each other.
Okay.
Did they trade? Did they share ideas? Did they fight?
Oh, yeah.
I think there's still a lot we can learn about the relationships between these cultures.
And I'm curious about the different roles people had in these societies.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Like, were only certain people mummified?
Right. Was it just for the elite, or did everyone get mummified?
Yeah, and what about women?
Right.
Yeah.
Were there different burial practices for men and women?
I guess we'll just have to keep digging.
Well, that's the fun of archaeology, isn't it?
Yeah, there's always something new to discover.
Exactly. And every new discovery gives us a little more insight into the lives of these ancient people.
It's like they're talking to us from across the centuries.
It really is.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And it just makes you want to learn more.
Yeah, it's so inspiring.
It really is, like all these people who lived so long ago and they're still like teaching us things.
It's a reminder that we're all part of this long chain of human history.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's about all the time we have for today.
Okay.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It has.
Thanks so much for joining me and talking about all this.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
For our listeners out there, if you want to learn more about these mummies and see pictures and stuff,
oh, yeah,
we'll put some links in the show notes to the Smithsonian and Al Jazeera articles.
Those are good ones.
And if you want to hear more deep dives like this one, make sure to subscribe to the All Sorts podcast on YouTube.
Yes, and don't forget to follow us on X, Instagram, and Threads, too.
Yeah, come hang out with us on social media. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the spirit of discovery alive. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive, a part of the All Sorts podcast.